With Alana McKenzie Page, who is an author and dating coach. Please note the book in the background, The Art of Feminine Seduction. Today, we're talking to everyone that's going through divorce or may get divorced or have already been divorced. You are going to need to talk to Alana. You're going to need to read her book because, from what I understand, Alana, the dating scene out there can be a little rough. How are you today?
I am well, but yes, the dating scene is incredibly rough for a majority of the people, I would say. Yeah.
What are you seeing out there? What specifically is going on? I'm hearing some what I would call horror stories as far as I've been married 28 years, so we joke about we won't want to have to train someone new and just what the dating scene would look like. I mean, now it's all app based. People don't want to meet in person. Tell us what's going on out there.
Yeah, that's a lot of what's happening. And just in general, it's sort of like people are very coming to dating very freaked out, you know? Um, Whether you've been divorced before or not, it's sort of like people come to dating with their stuff on full blast, and then it's two people meeting who are kind of in this place of anxiety or worrying about whether they can get into a relationship or not even wanting a relationship and just dating casually or you know coming to dating, I guess, with all of their with the guns full blazing in anxiety, or else kind of withdrawn is the other thing I'm seeing, is kind of uh like lackadaisically going into dating. It's like very uh
Just
I
kind of
guess, like,
showing up and
yeah.
no plan.
Exactly, exactly. So we've got kind of these two extremes, um, and and then people are just struggling with that level of intimacy that is required to date, to find someone really incredible who matches with you. Um, and it's changing. I think it's slowly changing. People are getting better and better, we could say, getting
Uh-huh.
more and more aware of how to show up to dating and how to create great relationships and communicate. There's a lot of communication training going on right now in
Hmm.
the world. But, in general, it has been pretty bleak. It's been pretty bleak. So,
Communication keeps coming up as one of the biggest issues, just of course when people are in relationships to begin with, but then of course, how do you communicate, going in, as you say, guns blazing on one end and lackadaisical on the other, and you just don't know what that person's intentions are. My clients, I was just, when you were talking, it's one thing if you are trying to date and you haven't been in a long-term relationship, you just been in the dating scene for a while. You do have, groups of friends and you meet people through friends and so forth. But if you're in a long-term relationship or on the other side of a divorce, people take sides, and now your friend pool has been kind of divided. And so I think that would add some additional strain on trying to get back into the dating scene.
yeah, absolutely, Tim. I mean, the kind of the level of grief that can take place during a divorce, right? Divorce is like top 3 of the top griefs of life, like right under death of a child, you know what I mean? It's
Wow.
because of that, what you just talked about. It's like you don't just lose your spouse, right? You lose kind of an identity. You maybe lose your house. You maybe lose your financial situation. You lose all of these friendships and kind of this whole picture of what your life has been like. And so to then go from that place into dating, right? You do have kind of a whole new identity in a way, right? You've undone a lot of what you had built over, you know, decades, potentially a year to many decades of marriage for most people. And so I like to think of it as completely starting over. Like it's a complete, you know, yes, you are hopefully coming with all of the knowledge that you've gained from being in a committed relationship for however long you were in it. And I highly recommend that people get into this mindset of it's brand new. Like dating is brand new. First of all, because it is brand new if you have been out of the dating scene for longer than 10 years, even. Dating has changed a lot, even in the past 10 years. Um, And you will be best served by being in that mindset of like freshness, I guess is the word that's coming to mind. Is if you are really meeting someone new with this mindset of this is fresh. I don't know who this person is. I don't know how you could even pretend you don't understand how relationships work so that you can really show up fresh for who this new person is and just get curious about what's going on in their world. Um, it just leads to so much better relationships. I mean, if people have been through the, marriage and counseling route before divorce, you know that bringing this curiosity is really effective in having great relationship communication, and it just if you use that at the beginning of a relationship, it's even more powerful. Like, to really just come with a clean slate and just bring that curiosity to a new person, um, you can really create some incredible connections with people.
And I guess the alternative to that is, and I think that advice is that makes great sense, because if you come into a new relationship and you bring your junk with you, or your preconceived ideas, or just you're using your past history to set expectations, or I think I would come with like a list of here's what things I like, this
Yeah.
is how I've done it for the last 28 years. So this is what I'm expecting. That's probably not going to fly.
No, it's not going to be very I mean, if you bring that list, maybe that will be very illuminating about who you are. But I wouldn't say it's going to be, "Oh, here's what I need," and then just some stranger is going to give it to you. I would not say it's gonna
Yeah.
work like that.
Yeah.
You may be in for some surprises, yeah.
So, you have I think just in talking to you for 7 minutes, you have like the perfect personality for what you do, because this could be serious topic for some people, right? You got to kind of keep it light, because I'm sure, especially if they've coming out of a relationship, they've already had that stress. And like you said, one of the top three, traumas in their life. And this might be trauma number three, the dating.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can really come come across as that. And I do deal with a lot of emotions in my from my clients. That is often primarily what we do because they've come off of the dating situation or the lack of, matches or whatever that's happening, and it is incredibly painful. So, a lot of what I do is to sit with that for people, but also, what I had to learn was how to bring this side of myself, the light side of myself, to dating and bring the fun even when it isn't. I didn't have a great time dating. That's how I came to this work. I had a really really tough time to show up to dating, and create relationships that had any depth or lasted any length of time longer than 3 months.
I
And
think we should
so,
talk about that a little bit. We kind of skipped right over your background. Like, why are you an expert in this? And I was just rereading your bio here. She searched high and low in multiple workplaces through several education institutes in three different continents. You've done, read books on mating, dating, and connection research, and read every book and podcast and TED Talk and YouTube out there. So, I mean, and you're in it, right?
yeah, well, now I'm married, but,
Yeah.
um,
Well, yeah, I
but
gotcha.
I did go through I mean, I went through all of it, right? It was
Yeah.
over a decade of really actively searching for I wanted to be in a marriage. I wanted to be in a committed partnership long term. I knew that, and I was dating and dating and dating, and it was leading nowhere. I mean, I really felt very incapable. That was kind of how it came across for me. I was really incapable of dating for a relationship. And so, as you just read that story, I lived all over the world. I did all kinds of different jobs. I tried. I really tried. I was very active. I'm a very active person. Um, and it just wasn't happening for me. And so eventually I started to get very interested in the kind of science, we could say, the science of relationships and the all the research that does exist out there about what makes dating work. What, can you do? What could I do was the question back then, to make a connection grow from this initial attraction, like moment of interest, into, a marriage, into a full-blown connected relationship that's meaningful, that is adding something positive to my life, all that kind of stuff. Getting to live in partnership, building my life alongside someone. Those were all sort of the goals, and I just really felt incapable of doing that for a very long time. And finding the research, it turns out there are people who have done the studies. They've looked into what it really takes, and it is something that you can learn. So that kind of fact even in itself was a revelation for me in terms of like, oh, I can change it. How it's gone for me before doesn't have to be the way that it goes for me in the future, you know? And I think especially for people who have been through divorce, there's the language I hear is often a lot about failure. There's a
Mm.
lot of fear, and sadness about the feeling like there's a failure of relationship that's happened. Um, and that's kind of heartbreaking in itself to be in this place where you feel that you've really failed at something. Um, and I want the message to be that just because something hasn't worked out doesn't mean that that is the way it's going to be for you forever. It's like you get to do it again, or you can try something new, or there are other kinds of relationships out there that maybe would be a better fit for your lifestyle or your desires, or it's like there's so many options out there. Um, yeah, just like I want to impart some hope, I guess, to people about it doesn't have to be the way that it has been. Whether it's, your old relationship dynamics that you played out with your previous partner, you can create new relationship dynamics. Or if it's really literally a completely new kind of relationship, maybe you don't want to get married again, also totally available now. I mean, there are all kinds of relationships that people are creating that aren't necessarily a marriage. So yeah, yeah, I think that's really the core of it there is like it's possible and what you want is possible.
I guess it's surprising, but not really surprising to the amount of effort it takes to like the struggles you went through to get into a relationship. It just like in maintaining a relationship, there's not everyone just meets the person of their dreams by mistake. It's
Yeah.
very intentional, and I think that that's what maybe gives adds to giving people hope, is that there is something they can do about it if they are finding failure or frustration or fear, in the dating scene, that they can take steps to improve. I don't want to say their odds, but improve their likelihood of success.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's really what my work is about, is how to improve your odds of success. Because there are just like, how to have a better divorce or how to have a better marriage. There are just proven techniques for how to date in a way that leads to deeper connection, better intimacy, increased communication, really getting the results that you want in dating to work for you, instead of you know, experiencing the little heartbreaks all over, being ghosted, just kind of the day-to-day things that people are dealing with in dating. Um, it's like it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to. Not required.
So, um, you're kind of the modern day Hitch. I'm sure you saw.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So, what maybe on looking at your bio, it says, ask me about some of the worst date you've ever been on. Maybe we could start with there, just for, I don't know if that it's a funny story or not, but maybe we could go from there and then maybe talk about some tips that or advice that you give. And then I think, even though I've heard the word ghosted, I think, people like that I'm dealing with that have been in, say 10, 15, 20 year marriages, and that I think that this whole ghosting thing may be a surprise to them.
Oh,
So
We can go there, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, the most shocking one that will definitely shock people if they've been married for many, many years, um, was that I was taken to a sex club for a 3rd date, without requesting to go there or agreeing. It was a surprise. I was told, it was going to be a surprise and I should dress up. Um,
Uh,
so I was expecting the theater or something like that. And yeah, I was taken to a sex club for gangbang night.
wow.
And, that was not my idea of a great time. It was not my personal, uh, desire. It was not something that had anything to do with who I am, what I like, uh, how I enjoy getting to know someone. Um,
Not on the resume you wanted for a future long-term relationship.
no, no, it was not. And, there's the foibles. I did
Yeah.
not end up participating in gangbang night. I did get out of there. Everything was okay, like, everything it was
How
safe.
does that work? Do you have to bring a +1 to be admitted? Is that the trick?
It was, yeah, it was free if that you were a partner and you participated. So, this man believed that this was his ticket into getting
Your free
into
admission.
yeah, free admission to the club. And,
Wow.
yeah, I was not impressed. I was not impressed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad that was a funny story. That's good. You
It
never know.
yes,
Could be
and,
something
I
else.
mean, we're over a decade later, I can laugh
Yeah,
about
you can talk about it.
it.
It is a good icebreaker though, right?
Yeah, it took
So
me
what
about a decade to get there, but yeah.
yeah, it's all uphill or downhill from there. What tips do you have or what could you how can we frame this? Someone coming out of a long-term relationship, what tips or advice do you give just in general, kind of high level to kind of tackle this dating situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing would be what we talked about before is to bring as much freshness to the experience as you can. And then the second thing is sort of like the double-edged sword of that, which is to recognize that you are still going to experience yourself in dating. So the issues that came up for you in your relationship, in your marriage are um, likely not going to just disappear just because you are now spending time with different partners. And so to really be aware of what those patterns are for you and how you tend to communicate and the things that you come up against in relating to people and intimacy, that they can just show up with new people as well. And so you want to be on the lookout for that right away. Like you want to just be on the lookout for, who am I discounting right off the bat without even giving them a chance, or who am I kind of pursuing really intensely. These are kind of two ways that this shows up very commonly. Is either having no interest in someone who's sort of genuinely interested in you, and you just feel like, "Ugh, like this is no good," or feeling very, this is the anxious attachment, right? Feeling very much like you need to definitely get this person, like there's
Mm.
kind of a chase going on, even before you really know who they are. So just to be on the lookout of that, there's this kind of push pull dynamic that happens often for people when they get into dating because their stuff starts to act up. Um, Around the fear of intimacy, or even getting over exuberant about how dating is going to work for them now. And if you really want to date successfully, just getting into the freshness of who this new person is, the ways they are different from your past partner, and then allowing the connection to unfold sort of organically, like really getting into who is this person? What is the conversation like? What's it like to talk to this person? And really just letting it unfold without introducing the kind of the holding or the pushing. Like there's no need to tug, and there's no need to push on the relationship. You really just want to be kind of available for connection.
You brought up a good point. So many therapists that I've talked to, interviewing them, and marriage coaches and the like, they talk about people get out of a relationship or get a divorce only to marry the same type of person.
Yeah.
How do you get people in your coaching and your programs and your book to get out of their stuff, as you say?
Most of it's awareness. I mean, that's the very first step. You can't fix anything you don't notice. So it's really about self-reflection first and foremost in terms of patterns, right? So um I'll just talk about my own marriage for a second. Uh, so we have a pattern where, I'll ask a question or I need an answer about some logistical thing. And then this leads to some shutting down on the other end. And then I go in picking, right? I go in nitpicking. I'm like, well, what about this? What about this detail? What about that? This doesn't help, right? that doesn't that doesn't help to be like going in and do all kinds of like pick. Um, doesn't lead to actual communication, right?
Right.
So for me, the awareness there is that okay, I when I need information, I can't go in picking. I can't go in picking. I can't go in last minute, right? If I am going to need help with something, I need to be really clear about that. I need to be really clear about the help that I really need instead of trying to, weasel around something, right? So my pattern is to uh when I get into that anxiety place is I will just try to um I'm trying to think of a good image for this. It's just like a little pickaxe, right? I'm
Yeah.
just like chopping at the rock from different angles. Like I'll just go in at different angles. And that's just not helpful, right? It's just not helpful. So for me, my work then, when I'm rewriting this pattern is not for me to be like, well, how can I make him feel less bad? It's not about asking that question. It's all about how can I be okay when he feels bad. First of all, how can I feel okay when he's having a hard time? And also, how can I effectively communicate beforehand if I'm gonna, you know, if we're trying to work out something logistically and I need it to happen by a certain time in order for me to feel okay.
Yeah.
How do I address that in a timely fashion for myself and for what I need? And then there are more layers to that, right? Like it's
Of
just
course.
there's just more and more layers. But you just start with that very first awareness of like, okay, what is happening here when communication breaks down, when emotions break down? What is the catalyst, right? And then what's the catalyst before that? And if you keep going back far enough, I promise you will find yourself
Gotcha.
somewhere in that cycle. I just heard a conversation earlier today between a couple, and it started out quite tense, right? There was just a question asked, and then the response was very tense coming back. And I just listened to this conversation kind of escalate. um, and it occurred to me that the person who called on the phone very first, who had a question, could have sort of stopped all of the conflict by simply saying, "I have a question. Do you have a minute?" Right? Like, I was able to sort of think that for myself. I don't know what was going on in their situation, their awareness, but
Right.
for me, it was like, imagine if someone called you and then asked you, "Hey, I have a question. Do you have a minute?" And then you could say, "Yeah, I can help you with this right now." Or you could say, "I'm actually really busy. It's a really bad time for me to talk. Like, can I call you in 10 minutes?" You know? So it's those kind of things. Like those are the little patterns that we tend to repeat. And I say little, but they're actually the things that build up and build up and build up and lead to relationship breakdown.
Mm. So we were talking some tips earlier. One was get out of your stuff, go in fresh.
Yep.
Well, is there like a step 2 or a step 3, or what's the progress? So they've become aware.
Yes.
They've decided they're going to leave their stuff behind, and they go on a date. What any tips or tricks, or what do you got for us?
Yeah, so what I teach is intimacy creation. And that's what's the book is mostly about, is about creating real intimacy. And what I generally teach as sort of it's the beginning method is something called emotional questions. And emotional questions are a technique that I developed using some of the neuroscience about how attraction happens, and also that very fun New York Times article that came out, 36 questions to fall in love, which
Hmm.
is this idea that you can ask these 36 questions in a specific order and fall in love with anyone is the idea.
Is there any truth to it?
People experience deeper levels of intimacy. That's what happens is once you get into this conversation that's very intentional and very intimate and emotionally connected, you can end up feeling that you're in love with someone. Now,
Hmm.
what love is a little bit of a philosophical debate. Um, so
Is
I
that how people start kind of falling for their therapists and so forth because of that kind of intimacy in the questions?
Absolutely, right? Because you feel emotionally
That
connected
makes
to
sense.
them at a very deep level. Yeah, exactly. Um, so my questions are a little bit more the method I teach of emotional questions are not quite as pointed. Like I don't say just use the 36 questions and then you'll have a successful date. What I teach are these emotional questions, which are open-ended questions, and they have an emotional word in them. So an emotional word is any feeling word. So like feel is an emotional word, love is an emotional word, hate is an emotional word, and then any of the kind of the adverbs that get at an emotion, so like worst, favorite, um, and anything that's going to elicit an emotional response from the person being asked the question is an emotional question. So an example of that would be, how do you feel about your job? Right? And that's different from what do you do? Right?
Hmm.
You can probably feel that, right?
And you're
So
gonna get
when
a
you
better answer too,
exactly, that's exactly it. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because you ask, "What do you do?" "I do X," as opposed to, "How do you feel about it?" Well, and I mean, you can't just say, "Well, I do this." You gotta explain.
Exactly. And that way you learn what the other person actually thinks, right? You learn how they actually relate to the work that they do, and usually a bunch of other stuff. And that's a much better way to tell whether they are compatible with you and whether you're interested in who they are at a deeper level. Than just knowing like, well, I'm a software developer with, you know, such and such company. That really doesn't tell you anything about them in the end.
So 36 questions. I'm gonna take a look at that. So you shared something about your marriage. I'm gonna share something about mine and just get your feedback on this. So I think I asked 5 questions. So I've been married 28 years now. So I think I asked 5 questions. So I met my wife at work
Mhm.
and we went on a date and we basically just sat there and I asked questions about politics. I asked her for position on having children. I mean, I went right down to because I was
Yeah.
very interested in her. So I went right
Yes.
down to make no, I was just checking I told you about bringing my list. I just checking off my
Mhm.
list and it all aligned, thankfully.
That's good.
Yeah. So that probably doesn't work so much these days.
I like to say it can work. That's another part of what I have in the book is like these are
Yeah.
all rules that are made to be broken. Like there actually aren't hard and fast like this is definitely a no and this is definitely a yes because
Yeah.
it's relationships. And relationships are about people and people are crazy. People are very different. All people, that's why it's incredible to have an intimate relationship is because you can learn how different people are and how differently they see the world and experience life. Um, and so, you know, I give out these tips for sure, but you can also, you go hard and fast, and your wife was obviously receptive to that, right? And also if you work together, I also want to say you probably had a little bit of rapport already, right?
Right.
Okay, so this
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
also Yeah. So I again,
It
don't
wasn't the
really
first question. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. You'd had conversations before that.
We established that there was a mutual interest prior.
Okay. Yeah. So that's very important. That's very important. Because then you're really on the same page as you're asking those questions. So she understands, okay, this is the checklist, right? Like this is the checklist of like, does this interest have the potential to go the distance?
Yeah.
Whereas if you are meeting someone fresh off the internet or you know, even through a mutual acquaintance, it's a brand new connection, right? You don't have that
Yeah.
rapport established to really to lean on through the political questions. So,
Just to bring that up again, politics is much more divisive these days. Is that, I'm assuming, some becoming a barrier, or is that on people's lists? Just the way people are about politics these days, it could make or break a relationship. I would imagine. I know people that got not divorced, but they separated because they found out, over the last couple of years they're far apart. I have
yeah.
friends from high school who they still talk to their parents, but they cannot talk about politics because they literally just lose their minds.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's becoming very, very intense. And what I've seen mainly in my crowd is the people caring about vaccines. One way or
Mm,
another, it's, I need them to be vaccinated or I can't have them be vaccinated. And there is this very polarized thing going on
yeah.
um, politically. Absolutely, absolutely.
I think the
Um,
views on the vaccine follow the political viewpoints, right? So they're kind of similar in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's even maybe a thing that people are sort of, it's like the gatekeeper, like you're saying. It's like, okay, well, what do they believe then behind that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So we were going to talk. I think this will be something that people that have been married 20 plus years will may not have heard the word unless they have young kids. Tell me what being ghosted is, and like define it, and then kind of give me an example of maybe that happening and how that makes that person feel
Yes,
on the
absolutely.
receiving
So
end.
ghosting, is when you are on an app usually, but it can also be over text and, the person stops responding, right? So they become a ghost, they just disappear from your life. And this can happen after a conversation, it can happen after a date, it can happen after several months of dating. And, so there are kind of these separate levels that distinguish how people feel about that, right? If you've been dating someone, building a relationship with them for 3 months or so, and then they just disappear without a word, that's highly confusing and frustrating and heartbreaking often. Um, Hopefully, if it's just after a conversation, that's a little bit less,
Right.
um, you
Yeah.
know, but there are definitely people who get into their emotions very intensely, even after a conversation. So, it really depends on you. Again, it depends on the person who is dating and again, their stuff. Like, it's very much about your stuff. Um, I I guess I was sort of ghosted before I started dating with the techniques I talk about in this book, uh, quite often, you could say. It was just like there wasn't enough intimacy, right? There wasn't enough emotional connection in the dating that I was doing previously. Uh, and then men would just disappear from my life. Like that was what they would do, and it was for me, it was incredibly painful. I mean, it was very, confronting, right? It's confronting to be like, "Well, I thought I was getting to know this person, but
Right.
now they're gone." Um, and it was only through sort of really looking at my own intimacy stuff and noticing like, "Oh, I don't even feel comfortable then, like, reaching out to them again a couple times to be like, 'Hey, how are you?
You kind of
You
want to
know,
hold back the next time, right?
yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, it affects how you show up then later. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
You
Um,
said earlier that dating has changed a lot. Can you give an example of what you're referring to? And it just from hearing the conversations, it just seems people go into, I guess everyone's different, but they go into relationships different entirely. They just don't have that commitment, or I want to say like work ethic. Like you have some ethics in dating. Like that's kind of got seems like it's gone out the window.
yeah, definitely people are not kind of on this ethical or even moral often place. They're just, we're kind of spoiled for choice because of the apps, right? That they do that to our mindset is like, well, it could be like 20 people today, Um, however many matches you get is however is the amount of people that you could be connecting with. And so it leads to this, yeah, kind of it's a little bit cheaper, right? Everything's a little bit cheaper. And Casual relationships are definitely very common now. Other things that are happening is like polyamory is coming up like in big ways, just
What
very
is that again?
quickly. Polyamory is where you have more than one partner by agreement. So, um,
Interesting.
yeah,
I mean, in a
exactly.
family dynamic, that 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 can't work long term. I mean, there's I think goes against the grain of true relationships. What are your thoughts on that?
It would never work for me.
Yeah.
It would never work for me. No.
Yeah,
Uh,
personally, but it's like, what are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, I have not participated in it or researched it. So, I
Gotcha.
cannot I cannot say yay or nay officially,
Yeah.
but I definitely know there are people out there, and who I am is someone who I don't want that.
Yeah.
That isn't my goal, um, and, yeah, I mean, it
Why
requires so much communication, and I am
yeah.
already working on just communication with one human, and that is enough for me.
Why do you think dating has become so casual in this way?
Um, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think, people are, there's this oh, man. Yeah, how much time do we have? There's, like, this changing of the family structure, right, that's going on right now. Um It's always changing, but right now it's specifically quite divided, and we haven't filled in the gaps, right? Like there have always been kind of absent fathers, but generally you lived with your entire extended family, so that was not quite as obvious. Or, the dad needed to provide for the family, and so it wasn't weird that he was gone time or whatever. And now it's like that those dynamics don't work anymore, and so we are seeing just, divorce, and all kinds of other relationship fracturing happening,
Yeah.
and then family fracturing, and then, um, you could think of blended families, right? Then there are new marriages happen, and then there are all kinds of different, um, dynamics happening within the family itself, and what is love? What is marriage? Like, these are all questions that are being asked right now.
Mm.
Uh, it's a huge shift. It's a huge shift going on in terms of, what is a long-term commitment even. Esther Perel is one of my big influences, and she asked this question or talks about this distinction of monogamy, right? Like, monogamy before, we could say like 100 years ago, meant one person for life. Like monogamy was you're with one person for life. That's your person. And now monogamy is one person at a time.
I was I was gonna step on you and say that, and then I wanted to hear you say it though.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. You've probably seen that interview. This is a
I know
great
I
topic.
didn't.
Oh, okay. Um, I can recommend any of her work. It's really interesting.
What was
But
that?
I recommend any of Esther Perel's work. She's very
Esther Pearls?
interesting. Esther Perel. It's Perel. She's Belgian. But
I'll
and
look it
she
up.
her work is in English though, so
Yeah,
but it's very interesting stuff. Relationships in the 21st century is kind of her expertise. She's a researcher.
gotcha.
Um, and yeah, that is what we're doing now, is like monogamy. To be with one person is like, and now I'm with this one person, and then
Yeah,
I'm with that one person. And just kind of again, the ethical landscape that creates
yeah.
is more casual. I mean, the idea is not I'm making it work with this person, or I'm showing up with this person. It's, you know, I do what
I
I
don't
want
know where people get the energy to do that. Like you're
to
saying, one conversation with one person, but to be dating multiple people simultaneously, trying to keep that in alignment, and then on top of everything else you have going on in your life, must be busy.
yeah. Um, so my approach, I enjoyed dating multiple people at a time for at least a month or two at the beginning. Like when I would first get on the apps, I liked to go out on several different dates, like to make a couple different connections, because inevitably you have the connections that you're like, this is really important. um, or it's very obvious when something isn't that great, or you have the middle of the road connections where you're like, this is interesting. I don't know where it's going to go. And uh, it kind of helps keep you honest because something that can happen is you can get really attached to it working out with one person and it doesn't. Um, because the other person's also an equal in the relationship. And
Mm,
so,
yeah,
if they don't want exactly what you want, then, you know, that's a sign that it's not right for you. And it's hard to accept that sometimes if you put all your eggs in one basket and you really believe that this is the one for you. So for me, it was helpful to at least casually date for a while. And then when it was time to take it to the next level, that's when I made decisions like, okay, now we're, you know, not talking to anyone else, not pursuing anything
yeah.
else, not on the apps
So
anymore.
I guess
Go for it. Sorry, I think my internet got connection got bad. Are you still there?
that's okay. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about the dating app. That seems to be where most people are meeting these days. Do you have like a list of best practices?
Yes. So what I like to say is you want to make sure you have a great profile. Um, and that great we're going to define as keeping it positive, remaining positive on the profile. This is just your first impression. So you don't actually need to put in super crazy meaningful things about yourself in order to attract a great match. You just want to keep it very authentic. You want to be really honest about who you are, but you also want to keep it pretty positive, um, in order to attract more more attention and the right kind of attention. Because that's the other thing is you don't want to be attracting uh, more problems into your
Sex
relationship life.
clubs.
Yes, exactly. That's the one. Ah. Um, and, um, and then when you start to chat, what I like to teach people is to initiate with a flirt. A flirt is a show of interest in who the other person is. So you're not going overboard. You don't need to go overboard with like uh being extra romantic yet with a stranger, but just a little bit of an indication about why you're interested in them and that you are interested in them. And that just helps get the energy flowing in the conversation. And it lets the other person know that you do care about them, that you did look at their profile and you think they're interesting, that you would like to pursue at least a conversation with them, and adds a little bit of fun in it. Right? A flirt is usually a little bit fun. So it kind of gets the fun activated in the conversation, because a lot of people are having no fun in dating and it's not good. um,
That's
and
work.
it does, it's feeling like a job for a lot of people, and it doesn't have to. So you want to introduce that little element of interest and fun, and then move into the emotional questions. And those are going to let you know, like we talked about, they just let you know so much more about the person and what it's actually like to talk to them, um, rather than, asking them these kind of pointed questions of like, where did you grow up? One word answer, right? Like you just want to avoid that kind of communication, especially right off the bat when that's the only contact you've had with this person. You want to be really sure that you are asking really opening questions, like very important questions, we could say, like questions that actually are going to tell you about this person and how they relate to the world. And then from there, you just hopefully you can build on that, right? And then that's when you're getting into the intimacy building portion of the relationship. And if everything goes smoothly between the two of you, you could be off to the races in often a very short time. I personally never spent more than a week on dating apps looking for matches,
Wow.
because I used this system and it was very effective. It was just like I put in a bunch of work for a week finding different people who I enjoyed talking to, like I genuinely had a connection with. And then from there, I could move into the portion of actually meeting them and getting to know more about who they are and how they, meeting in real life and how they show up in the world and treat other people and that kind of stuff. Um, and it was very effective. It was very effective for me. Kept it quick and easy,
Yeah.
less painful. Didn't take as many things personally because it was like, oh well, obviously, this person that I've met for 2 days is
Right.
not that important in my life.
Right.
Just really kept things very, uh, very obvious. We could say very obvious about what the level of relationship was.
Are the dating I'm assuming the dating app is or apps are that's the primary way people are meeting people these days. Are there other places people can go that you'd recommend to find relationships if they're not wanting to do the dating app route?
Absolutely. Dating apps are very direct, but people are still meeting in all of the same old traditional ways, being connected by family, meeting, at church or at different clubs. Um, Definitely joining classes is a great thing to do if you want to meet someone new, or they're in cities. If you live in a city, there are all of these meetup groups, like hiking groups.
Okay.
You can join any kind of, an artistic activity, improv, theater groups, things like that. Um, I think even like Toastmasters, people met their person at. It's like become involved in your community in ways that you are interested in. That's really the best way to go about it, is to go to places that you like, right? Like, go to places you like, and then there are going to be other people there who have, yeah, similar values, interests, and, goals. We could even say goals in life, in terms of meeting other people or looking for a relationship. Like, they're out there, but you do have to go out
Yeah,
to
my wife says she goes, if she was to pass away, to that I should immediately, and I think her plan is to do the same thing, unfortunately,
yeah.
but to join a country club.
Mhm.
She's going for someone rich this time, I think.
Good thinking. I know several people who met their person playing golf, so
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm not going to let her learn golf.
Yeah.
So, well, what didn't I ask you? I think we covered so much
I know, this is
here.
amazing.
I think this is fantastic. You have any partying advice before we sign off? And then we'll talk about your book one more time and how people can find you.
Yeah, I would just go back to that beginning point because I think for the post-divorce situation, that's just the best thing to keep in mind, and maybe the hardest thing too is to remain in the fresh and the newness of, what it's like to meet someone new. So really keeping an open mind about who they are and how relationships work and how dating is, just really approaching it with a beginner's mind, could it can just take you so far, so far. So
Great advice. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know my listeners are going to be glad to hear something other than divorce this time around. Alana McKenzie Page, make sure you get her book, The Art of Feminine Seduction. And then your website, Alana, sovereign-dating.com. I think you have additional information. You have, you can get on a email list and some other resources there.
yes, I have some flirtation classes for free. I have a YouTube channel where I teach a lot of the stuff I just talked about in more depth, also called Sovereign Dating. Same thing on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm Sovereign Dating everywhere, and all over the place. You can find me. And yeah, I have more podcast episodes and just lots of ways to learn more about how to date in the modern day.
Awesome. Very much needed topic. And I appreciate your expertise. This has been, I feel like I'm getting free dating advice, free marriage advice, free therapy when I interview experts like you guys. So I really appreciate it. I hope I asked some good questions. The information that came back was awesome. But again, thank you so much. And I'll make sure to connect with you on all your various social media outlets.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim. Great questions. So
My pleasure.
appreciate your time.
All right.